Hello! In this video, I'm going to show you how to make these cool, curved, wooden, mid-century style drawer pulls. I got this idea from my buddy Cliff Ham over at Ham Built. If you don't follow that guy on Instagram, you're a fool. Go do it right now. Watch this video. I'm going to show you the entire process, and you might subscribe if you feel like it. Enjoy!
White snow, red sky.
So to start out, you're going to need a board approximately 1 inch thick by 6 inches wide, and the length is going to be determined by the length of your drawer. You want it to be just a bit longer than the drawer that you're going to use in combination with this pull. Now on said board, you're going to want to make a line 1/4 of an inch down from the top of the board. This is basically us laying out where our pulls are going to be cut on this board. Then you're gonna mark another line 3/8 of an inch over from the end of the board, and then you're going to mark a line 1/4 of an inch off of that line, moving towards the outer edge of the board. In between those two lines should equal 1/4 of an inch and will make up the outer edge of our drawer pull. Next, we're going to set up our table saw to cut the cove on the underside of our boards. So you're going to set your board on the table saw, then raise or lower your saw blade until it is just even with that line that is 1/4 of an inch down from the top of our board. Then we're going to put an auxiliary fence on the top of our table saw to cut a cove at 15 degrees across the table saw blade. The easiest way to determine 15 degrees is to simply take a scrap piece of plywood on your chop saw, set at 15 degrees, and just make a cut. Then you know you have a template that will get you exactly 15 degrees on your auxiliary fence. To get our auxiliary fence in the proper alignment, we're going to take that same 3/8 inch setup block we used to mark out our board, and with the saw blade raised to the appropriate height, we're going to make sure that the end of our cut is exactly 3/8 of an inch away from the start of our fence. Then, making sure that the board stays exactly at 15 degrees, you want to bring the fence over so that it is touching the base of the board. That will hold the auxiliary fence in place at the front of your saw. But you still have to hold it in place at the back of your saw. Now I have an old ratty outfeed table, so I just put a screw into the table to make sure that it stays nice and firm and isn't going to go anywhere, making sure that the blade stays that 3/8 of an inch away from the fence. Now, if you were to try and make this cove cut with the blade at its full height, you would either lose a finger or destroy the board. So you want to drop the blade down to about 1/8 of an inch. You're going to do a lot of small, shallow passes, raising the blade after each pass. Now, the board is 6 inches wide, which is much too wide for one drawer pull. We do it this way so that we can actually make multiple pulls at one time. So once you run the board through on one side, flip it around and run it through on the other side. We're essentially making 2 pulls at the same time by doing it this way. Remember that after each pass you can raise the blade slightly, and we will keep doing this until we get to our desired height. As you can see in the footage, I am just slowly raising the blade after each pass to creep up on that line that we previously drew 1/4 of an inch down from the top of our board. In all honesty, it's probably okay if your cut is slightly below that line. You just don't want to go above it or your drawer pull will be too thin. But with our cove cut to the correct depth, we are going to redraw a line 1/4 of an inch away from the front of that cove cut. This is going to determine the thickness that we want for our drawer pull. Then we're just going to slightly draw a reference of what we want the pull to look like on the front of that board. Then after removing our auxiliary fence, we're going to change the blade angle on the table saw to 15 degrees, and we're going to run the board through that 15 degree, cutting off as much material as we can without crossing over our 1/4 of an inch referenced line, showing where our pull is going to land on that board. It should look something like this. Continuing on with this theme, we're going to change the blade angle once again, this time to 30 degrees, and we are going to repeat this entire process over again. A reminder to cut as much material as you can without crossing over that 1/4 of an inch reference line, as you can see here. And hot dang, we are going to do it once again, this time changing the blade angle all the way to 45 degrees. Again, removing as much material as possible without removing any of our 1/4 of an inch referenced line. As you can see in this wonderful film footage, we are starting to get a nice curve to our board after making those 3 passes at the different angles. But we still have a little bit of material to remove. This annoying little tab here on the end needs to come off. For that, we will leave the table saw and we will move to the joiner. Now, I don't have a specific angle for you to set the joiner at. I simply put my board on there and move the fence until it looks like it is roughly in line with our referenced mark on the end of the board. With that, we've done about as much shaping as we can do on the big machines. So next, you're going to want to get a very sharp hand plane and just start knocking down all those little corners that you created on the table saw and joiner. Then I decided to take this little piece of 3-inch PVC pipe and cut it down to create a curved sanding block. This will help us maintain the curve on the front of our pole as we sand it smooth and get rid of any remaining ridges or bumps that might have been left by either the table saw or the hand plane. Now, I should mention that there is a little bit of art or personal preference involved when you are doing your sanding. There's really no wrong way to do this. You just want to get the look that you are going for. I noticed there was one more ridge I wasn't happy with, so I went back to the hand plane and then continued sanding. And I removed the block, did a little bit of sanding with just the sanding pad until I was happy with the curve of the overall board. Then I flipped it around and I did the same exact thing to the other side. Just remember, when you flip the board around, you are also flipping around the grain direction, so you need to start on the opposite side with your hand plane than you started before. I almost forgot. But after a little hand planing and sanding, you should have a nice rounded edge on your board, and it should look something like this. With our board all shaped, it is time to start cutting out our actual drawer pulls. So the first thing we need to do is take that board, which is essentially 2 poles, and cut it in half to 2 separate pieces right down the middle of the board. Then, with our board sitting on a flat surface, you are going to take a straight edge and put a mark just behind where your pole starts to curve. Then from the back flat portion of your drawer pole, you're going to mark the distance to that mark you just put on the edge. Then you're going to flip around the piece. You're going to find that same measurement and put another mark on the opposite side of your drawer pole. Then with a long straight edge, you are going to connect those 2 dots, putting a line across the entire surface of your piece. Next, using a tape measure, we are going to find the center of our pre-cut piece, and we are going to map out where we want our actual pull handles to land. Now, personal preference is the name of the game here. You can make your drawer pull as big or as small as you'd like. For these, I'm doing a 6-inch drawer pull in the center of our pre-cut piece. So after marking out 3 inches from either side of our center point, I'm using a 5-inch sanding disc as a template to get a round reference from which we can cut out our handles. Now, cutting along our line that we already drew onto our piece, I'm cutting as much of that distance as I can on the table saw first. You just don't want to go too far or you will cut into your pre-drawn handle and you'll have quite a mess to clean up. After cutting as much as I can on the table saw, I cut the remaining shape out on the band saw. Just remember to go nice and slow. It's better to cut just shy of our referenced line and then clean up later rather than cutting off too much. After completely cutting out our shape on the table saw and bandsaw, I take the pull over to my oscillating spindle sander to clean up any excess material that was left behind, bringing the profile just to the edge of our pre-drawn referenced line. Then the only thing left to do is to cut the entire drawer pull down to 1/4 of an inch, and you should be left with a nice, beautifully shaped, curved drawer pull that you can then laminate on the top of a piece of solid stock or veneered plywood, and it should look something like this. To show you what it looks like all glued up, here is another drawer face that I have done previously with it all trimmed down and sanded. As you can see, it is quite a handsome drawer front. Look, it even works to open a drawer. Cool.
I hope you enjoyed that video. Now, go make yourself some curved drawer pulls. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, well, get the heck out of here. No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to leave. But maybe it would be a good idea to just subscribe before this video ends right now.